I still remember the exact sound the door made when it closed behind him. A soft click, quiet, final, like the last nail sealing a coffin. He walked away that day with my house, my savings, my business shares, even the car I had paid for before we ever met. But he didn't realize something. He hadn't taken everything, because the one thing he left behind was the only thing that could destroy him. And when he finally understood that, it was already too late. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted with your whole life, if you've ever been underestimated, discarded, or treated like you were nothing, then you're going to feel this story in your bones. My name is Melissa, and here we tell stories about karma, justice, and the quiet kind of revenge that hits hardest. So if you believe that people eventually get exactly what they deserve, make sure you're subscribed. Now let me tell you how I lost everything, and how I made sure he lost far more. The night he told me he wanted a divorce, I was stirring soup. It sounds stupid now, but that detail has never left me. The smell of garlic and thyme hung in the air. The kitchen window was fogged from steam. It was such an ordinary moment. He stood in the doorway with his hands in his pockets. No emotion on his face. "I think we should separate," Daniel said. Just like that, calm, detached, like he was discussing the weather. The spoon slipped from my fingers and clattered against the pot. "What?" I whispered. He didn't repeat himself, he didn't have to. Because in that moment, I already knew. I knew about the late nights at work. The sudden password changes. The way he stopped touching me. The cold politeness that had replaced affection. There was someone else. I felt it like a physical pain, sharp and hollow at the same time. "Is there another woman?" I asked quietly. He didn't even hesitate. "Yes." That single word hit harder than any scream ever could. I remember gripping the counter because my knees felt weak. "How long?" I asked. "Almost a year." "A year?" A whole year of lying to my face, sleeping next to me, eating meals I cooked, letting me talk about our future while he was already planning life without me. Something inside me cracked. "Why?" I asked, my voice barely steady. He shrugged. "I'm not happy, Melissa, haven't been for a long time." That shrug, that casual dismissal of 10 years together. It hurt more than the betrayal. Because in that moment, I realized something terrifying. He wasn't sorry. Not even a little. The divorce process was brutal. Daniel didn't just want to leave. He wanted to win. He hired one of the most aggressive lawyers in the city, the kind that smiles while they dismantle your life piece by piece. I couldn't understand it. We had built everything together. Or at least that's what I had believed. But the legal documents told a very different story. Because over the years, while I was focused on growing our business, running operations, working late nights, Daniel had quietly structured everything in his name. The house, the accounts, the investment portfolios, even parts of the company. I remember sitting in the lawyer's office, staring at the paperwork. This can't be right," I said. My hands were shaking. The lawyer sighed sympathetically. "Melissa, legally, most of these assets are registered under Daniel's ownership. It will be extremely difficult to contest." It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. "But I built that company," I whispered. "I worked 16-hour days for years." He nodded. "I believe you, but legally belief doesn't matter. Documentation does." That was the moment I realized something horrifying. Daniel hadn't just cheated on me. He had been planning this exit for years. The final court hearing felt surreal. Daniel sat across from me in a tailored suit, looking calm and confident. Next to him sat her. The woman he left me for. Younger, stylish, smug. She didn't even try to hide her satisfaction. At one point, she leaned toward him and whispered something that made him smirk. I felt heat rise in my chest. Humiliation, rage, grief, all tangled together. When the judge delivered the final ruling, the words blurred together. But one sentence echoed loudly. Primary ownership of marital assets will remain with Mr. Carter. Mr. Carter. Not Daniel. Not the man I once loved. Just a legal name tied to the person who had taken everything from me. The house. My business stake. Savings. Investments. Even the car. When we walked out of the courthouse, he stopped me. Melissa. I turned slowly. He looked relieved. Like a man who had just escaped a burden. I hope you can move on, he said. Move on. Those two words made something cold settle inside my chest. He wasn't just leaving. He was erasing me. And he believed he'd gotten away with it. He believed he had won. 3 months later, I was living in a small apartment. 1 bedroom, bare furniture, silence everywhere. I couldn't sleep. Every night I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying everything. The lies. The manipulation. The years stolen from me. I felt powerless. Discarded. Invisible. And the worst part. He was thriving. I saw pictures online. Daniel and his new girlfriend on luxury vacations, smiling in the house I had once called home. He had replaced me effortlessly. Like I had never mattered. That's when something inside me changed. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quietly. Like ice forming. Because one night, while going through old files on my laptop, I found something. A folder I hadn't opened in years. Inside it were documents. Emails. Contracts. Records. Details about something Daniel had once begged me to help him with early in our business days. Something he thought I had deleted long ago. Something that, if revealed, wouldn't just hurt him. It would destroy everything he had. I stared at the screen for a long time, my heart pounding. And for the first time since the divorce, I smiled. Because that was the moment I realized. He hadn't taken everything. He had left behind the one thing that could change his fate forever. And he had no idea. At first I didn't act. I just sat there in the dim light of my apartment, staring at the screen while my pulse thudded in my ears. The folder was still there, untouched, forgotten. Or at least forgotten by him. But not by me. Because the moment I saw those files, memories came flooding back like a storm breaking through a dam. It was from the early days of our business. Back when we were struggling, back when we had nothing but debt, stress, and blind hope. Back when Daniel used to say things like, "We're a team, always." I almost laughed thinking about it now. A team. What a joke. The truth was the business had started with me. Not him. I was the one who came up with the idea. I was the one who worked nights building client networks. I was the one who took loans under my credit. Daniel handled paperwork and finance. Or at least that's what I believed. But 5 years into our growth, we hit a crisis. A massive contract opportunity. One that would save us from bankruptcy. But we didn't meet all the legal requirements. Specifically, 1 licensing certification. Without it, we couldn't qualify. Daniel panicked. I remember that night vividly. He was packing our office, sweating, muttering to himself. "If we don't get this contract, we're finished," he said. I tried to stay calm. "Then we'll wait until we qualify properly." But he shook his head. "No, we won't survive that long." And then he said something that changed everything. "Melissa, I know someone who can fix this." I didn't understand what he meant at first. Until he explained. He wanted to submit falsified documentation. Fake compliance certification. My stomach dropped. "No," I said immediately, "absolutely not." But he begged. And I mean begged. He grabbed my hands, his eyes desperate. Please, just this once, we'll fix it later. Once we're stable, we'll update everything legally. He sounded terrified. And I loved him. So I trusted him. God, I trusted him. I helped prepare the files. Not because I wanted to cheat, but because I believed him when he said it was temporary, necessary, our only way to survive. And when the contract was approved, the business exploded. Success came fast after that. New clients, bigger deals, real certifications eventually. Everything became legitimate over time. Or so I thought. Because what I didn't realize was this. Daniel had never corrected the original records. He had buried them, hidden them, and quietly ensured that all official ownership stayed under his control. Which meant something terrifying. Legally, if those original falsified documents surfaced, it wouldn't just be a minor issue. It would be corporate fraud. Serious enough to trigger investigations. Fines. Prison. The realization made my chest tighten. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. I whispered to myself, he ruined me, using the very success built on this lie. The irony burned. But even with that knowledge, I didn't move immediately. Because revenge isn't as simple as anger makes it seem. In reality, it's complicated, painful, terrifying. There were nights I woke up drenched in sweat, my mind racing with questions. What if this destroyed me too? What if I got dragged down with him? What if it backfired? I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't eating properly. Every time I saw his photos online, laughing, thriving, living in luxury, funded by the life we built together, the rage would surge again. But then doubt would follow. One night I sat on the floor of my apartment, surrounded by old paperwork, whispering to myself, is this revenge or is it justice? That question haunted me. Because deep down I wasn't a vengeful person. I was someone who had been pushed too far. Someone who had been erased. Someone who had been robbed of years, effort, identity. And the worst part, he never once apologized. Not once. 6 months after the divorce, I ran into him unexpectedly. At a cafe downtown. I froze when I saw him. He looked polished, confident, successful. Like nothing had ever happened. He noticed me and walked over casually. Melissa, wow, it's been a while. His tone was light. Friendly. As if we were old acquaintances. Not two people whose lives had been shattered. I forced myself to stay calm. Yes, it has. He glanced around the cafe. So, how have you been? I almost laughed. How had I been? Living in a tiny apartment, starting from zero, trying to rebuild after losing everything. But I didn't give him that satisfaction. I'm doing fine, I said evenly. He nodded. That's good, really, I'm glad. There was no guilt in his eyes. Only relief. And then he said something that changed everything. Something that burned away the last traces of hesitation inside me. You know, Melissa, sometimes things fall apart because they were never meant to last. I felt my fingers curl into fists. He continued casually. We both deserve better lives. We both. As if what he had done was mutual. Equaled. As if he hadn't orchestrated the entire destruction. I leaned forward slightly and asked quietly, did you ever regret it? For the first time he hesitated. Just for a second. Then he said, no. That single word slammed into me like a hammer. No remorse. No guilt. No humanity. Just cold finality. He stood up. Well, take care of yourself. And he walked away. Just like he had the day of the divorce. Without looking back. I sat there for a long time after he left, My hands trembling, my heart pounding. But something inside me felt different. Not broken, not weak, not helpless, cold, focused, clear, because that moment erased all doubt. This wasn't revenge anymore. This was accountability. He had built his empire on deception. He had destroyed me without hesitation. And he truly believed he would never face consequences. That night I went home, opened the folder again, and began organizing everything. Emails, contracts, time-stamped files, backup records, every piece of proof. Methodically, carefully, calmly. For the first time in months, I slept peacefully. Because now I wasn't drowning anymore. I was planning. And Daniel had absolutely no idea that his fate had already begun to change. Revenge doesn't start with action. It starts with silence, with watching, with patience so deep it almost feels like stillness. That's where I lived for the next several months, quietly rebuilding my life on the outside, while slowly dismantling his on the inside. I didn't rush, because rushing is emotional, and emotion makes mistakes. Instead, I treated it like a long chess game. Every move had to be precise. Every step had to be safe. Because one thing terrified me more than anything else. If I did this wrong, I could destroy myself too. So the first thing I did was protect myself. Legally. I hired a forensic legal consultant under strict confidentiality. I didn't tell them everything at first. I framed it as a hypothetical situation. What would happen, I asked carefully, if a company's early contracts were approved using falsified compliance documents, but those actions were directed by a specific executive? The consultant leaned back, thinking, it depends on who signed what, who authorized it, who benefited. I slid over copies of documents, specifically the ones with Daniel's signature. Not mine, because years ago, he had insisted on being the official signatory. At the time, I thought it was just his controlling nature. Now I understood. He had unknowingly sealed his own fate. The consultant looked through everything slowly, then said something that made my pulse quicken. These records clearly indicate decision authority rested with him. I stayed very still. So if these surfaced, they would trigger an investigation, likely severe consequences for him personally. I swallowed. And what about me? The consultant met my eyes. You appear to have acted under his instruction. Legally, you'd likely be considered a cooperating witness, not a primary offender. The tension that had lived in my chest for months loosened. Not fully, but enough. For the first time, I knew this was possible. But revenge isn't just legal strategy. It's emotional endurance. Because every day I still saw him thriving. He and his girlfriend moved into the house we once shared. They renovated it, repainted it, erased every trace of me. Friends who once knew us both stopped contacting me. Some took his side. Others just chose the easier path, which was silence. Loneliness is a heavy thing. Heavier than anger sometimes. There were nights I sat alone in the dark, asking myself, is this worth it? Will it heal anything? Or will it just leave me emptier? But then memories would come back. His voice in the courthouse. I hope you can move on. His calm expression while stripping away everything I built. His flat, emotionless no when I asked if he regretted it. And the doubt would disappear. Because this wasn't about healing. This was about truth. And truth doesn't need permission. I began quietly gathering more evidence. Old backup drives. Archived email servers. Financial transaction histories. Every piece formed a timeline. A story. A clear narrative that showed exactly what he had done. I even recovered a voice recording, one I had completely forgotten about. Years ago, during that crisis period, I had recorded a late-night business discussion for meeting notes. I played it one evening and froze, because there it was. His voice, clear, panicked, saying, "We don't have a choice, Melissa. Submit the documents as I instructed. I'll handle everything if anything happens." My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. That recording was more powerful than any contract. It showed intent, authority, responsibility. I leaned back in my chair and whispered, "You did this to yourself." But I still waited. Because timing was everything. If I exposed him too early, he could prepare defenses. If I moved too late, evidence could disappear. So I watched, quietly, until one day an opportunity appeared. Daniel announced publicly that his company was preparing for a major expansion. A merger deal with an international firm. It was all over business news. This was the biggest move of his career. And here's the crucial detail. Major mergers require deep due diligence, financial audits, compliance reviews, regulatory inspections. Meaning, this was the exact moment when hidden skeletons would cause maximum damage. I remember staring at the announcement article, feeling a calm certainty settle over me. This is it. Not out of rage, not out of impulsiveness, but with a cold, steady clarity. Because this timing meant two things. One, his company couldn't hide anything during a regulatory investigation. Two, the fallout would be immediate and devastating. Professionally, financially, reputationally. Everything he valued most. The final step was the hardest. Actually sending the evidence. My hands trembled when I prepared the report package. Documents, email chains, audio recordings, timeline analysis. Everything organized with clinical precision. I stared at the submission portal for regulatory authorities. My finger hovered over the mouse. For a moment, doubt surged again. Not fear, not guilt, but something deeper. Sadness. Because once I clicked, there would be no turning back. No undoing it. No pretending we once loved each other. This would end him. Completely. I closed my eyes. And a memory surfaced. The day of the divorce hearing. When he walked past me without looking back. Without hesitation. Without remorse. I opened my eyes again. And clicked. Submit. The silence afterward was strange. Almost unreal. Nothing happened immediately. Days passed. Then weeks. Life continued normally. Until one morning, I woke up to dozens of notifications. News alerts. Business headlines. Messages from old contacts. All saying the same thing. Daniel's company was under federal investigation. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the screen. My hands were steady. My breathing calm. Not triumphant. Not excited. Just certain. Because I knew something he didn't yet fully understand. This wasn't just an investigation. This was the beginning of his collapse. And he still had no idea. Who had changed his fate forever. The first headline hit at 7:12 in the morning. I remember the exact time because my phone wouldn't stop vibrating on the nightstand. At first, I thought it was just another spam notification. But when I opened my eyes and saw the flood of alerts, my stomach dropped. Major corporate fraud investigation launched against Carter Holdings. Merger deal suspended amid compliance violations. Internal documents suggest executive misconduct. I sat up slowly, my heart beating in a strange, steady rhythm. Not racing. Not panicked. Just heavy. Like something inevitable had finally arrived. For a long time I just stared at the screen in silence. Then I whispered to myself, "It's begun." The investigation moved faster than I expected. Because once regulators started digging, they didn't just find one issue. They found everything. The falsified certification records, the hidden approvals, the altered compliance filings from the early years. And most importantly, they found proof that Daniel had personally authorized every step. Within days, his company's stock plummeted. Investors withdrew. Partners pulled out of agreements. The international merger collapsed overnight. I watched it all unfold from my small apartment. News channels showing his face. Business analysts discussing ethical failures and leadership misconduct. Former employees speaking anonymously about questionable decisions from years ago. It was surreal, because just months earlier, he had been celebrated as a visionary entrepreneur. Now he was being described as a cautionary tale. But the moment that hit hardest came 2 weeks later, when his name appeared in a different kind of headline. CEO Daniel Carter resigns amid fraud investigation. I felt something shift inside me. Not joy. Not relief. Just closure beginning to form. Because I knew what resignation really meant. It meant the fall had officially begun. And there was no recovery from this. A month later, I saw him for the first time since the investigation started. By accident. At a courthouse. He looked unrecognizable. Not physically, but in energy. His shoulders were tense. His face drawn. His confidence completely gone. Gone was the polished, untouchable man who once walked through life like consequences didn't apply to him. He looked hunted, exhausted, cornered. He saw me too, and froze. For a few seconds, we just stared at each other across the hallway. I could see the moment recognition hit him. Not just recognition of me, but understanding, realization. Because he wasn't stupid. He knew. He knew I was the only person who still had access to those early records. Slowly he walked toward me, each step hesitant, like approaching something dangerous. When he stopped in front of me, his voice was quieter than I had ever heard it. "You did this. Not a question. A statement." I met his eyes calmly. "I told the truth," I replied. He shook his head slightly, disbelief written across his face. "You destroyed everything." That sentence hung in the air, and for a moment I felt the weight of it. Not guilt, but gravity. Because yes, his world was collapsing. But then I asked quietly, "Did you think about that when you destroyed mine?" He flinched. Actually flinched. For the first time in 10 years, I saw real emotion on his face. Regret. Fear. Desperation. He ran a hand through his hair. "Melissa, please, you don't understand how bad this is." I held his gaze steadily. "No," I said softly, "I understand perfectly." Because I did. I understood sleepless nights. Financial ruin. Losing a home. Losing a future. Losing your identity. He swallowed hard. "They might charge me criminally." His voice trembled. "They could take everything." The irony of his words almost hurt to hear. I stepped slightly closer and said the words that had lived inside me for years. "That's exactly what you did to me." Silence fell between us. Heavy. Final. He opened his mouth as if to say something else. But nothing came out. because there was nothing left to say. No excuses could undo what he had done. No apology could erase years of betrayal. And deep down he knew that. So I simply turned and walked away. Just like he had done to me. Except this time, I didn't feel broken. I felt free. The fallout continued for months. The investigation confirmed multiple counts of corporate fraud. Daniel faced massive fines, civil lawsuits, and eventually, criminal charges. He lost the company, lost his reputation, lost his wealth. The house was seized as part of financial settlements. Even his relationship with the woman he left me for collapsed under the pressure. Because people who build their lives on betrayal rarely survive crisis together. In the end, he was left with almost nothing. Exactly where I had once been. As for me, I didn't suddenly become rich again. There was no dramatic windfall. No instant perfect ending. But something far more valuable happened. I rebuilt. Slowly. Steadily. On my own terms. I started a consulting business using my real expertise. Not hidden behind someone else's name. Not controlled by someone else's decisions. And for the first time in years, I slept peacefully. No nightmares. No anger. No heaviness in my chest. Because justice isn't about seeing someone suffer. It's about restoring balance. About knowing the truth finally surfaced. About reclaiming your power. And that's exactly what happened. Sometimes people ask me if I regret exposing him. If I ever feel guilty. And my answer is always the same. No, because I didn't ruin his life. He did that himself. Years earlier. The moment he chose deception over honesty. Greed over loyalty. Cruelty over love. All I did was make sure the truth finally caught up to him. So if you're listening to this right now, and you feel like someone has taken everything from you, remember this. They can take your money. They can take your home. They can even take your reputation for a while. But they can never take the truth. And sooner or later, truth always changes someone's fate forever. If this story stayed with you, if you believe that justice always finds a way, make sure you like this video and subscribe. Because here we tell stories about betrayal, resilience, and the quiet power of karma. And sometimes, the strongest revenge isn't loud. It isn't dramatic. It's simply letting the truth do what it was always meant to do. Destroy the lies. And set you free.